Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Art of Parenting. This is your host, Jeanne-Marie Pennell. And today I have Erin Loechner, we're going to talk about the digital world and what her decisions about it have been, her personal decisions. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. So, Erin, thank you for being on the show and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here to chat with you.
Yes. So, as I always like to get started, I would love for you to define what the art of parenting is to you.
I love that question. And I love that you said art of parenting and not science of parenting, because even though we all want the formula, it doesn't exist. And for me, art of parenting, it's just the idea that it is going to be a lot of pivoting, a lot of listening, a lot of following your child's lead, it's a dance, it is really. It changes each season. I feel like you really do need to be attuned and focused on the art itself, which is what every artist would tell you, right? It's not something to slapdash create on a whim. It takes a lot more work than it looks like it should take. And that to me is the art part of
Yeah,
parenting.
beautiful. And what I hear also from your answer is this very kind of intuitive and listening to ourselves, right? Not like you say, not having a formula that we just follow the steps because we're different, our children are different, and it's an art. So
Yes,
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 yes.
beautiful. So I would love, Erin, if you could just take the time to kind of introduce yourselves to our listeners, to our viewers, a little about yourself and how you came to this personal decision of living a tech-free life.
Of course, yes. In my definition, I would say tech free, meaning free from free from technology's hold, right? It doesn't mean that technology doesn't exist for us and we're totally off grid. And
Because we're here, right?
we are on a podcast together, but we are free from tech, meaning technology does not dictate our time or our lives together. And how that began for us is I was a social media influencer of all things. Uh, Worked in the industry for years and years and years. I was an HGTV.com host. I had millions of followers. And I recognized after the birth of my first child, which would have been 12 years ago, that were I to continue down this path, I would be parenting with my phone in my hand a lot more than I wanted to. And so my husband and I we've always had lots of conversations about technology, being that that's sort of the intersection of our work. He worked at Apple's ad agency, of all places. And so he knows the algorithm. I know the algorithm. We know it from different ends. And we both knew this is not a place we want our children to end up. This is not an area where we want to invest our lives. And so we sort of kind of formed this family motto that was be more engaging than the algorithm, because we knew it's not enough to say no to devices. We have to say yes to something better on the other side. And so from there, from that place, we have kind of formed this very non-traditional opt-out lifestyle, I guess you could say, which was the birth of the book, The Opt-Out Family.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'd love if you could share a little bit about what that looked like for your family. Like what were the decisions and how I mean, your children were young, you were young parents, so it's more about, your mutual buy-in and kind of making those decisions. Because I guess I ask because I know for me, I feel and I will say I'm of another generation, I think, of parenting. We didn't have smartphones when my children were young, right? So there wasn't that pull and such. And I know that parents today have that. And so I really commend you, first of all, being an influencer and being kind of in that world to say, okay, this is not for our family. But what are those kind of steps that you took to maybe wean yourself off and to just, make those choices? Because in the end, that's what it is. It's making a choice for ourselves and for our families.
It is. It's making the choice. And I think, it's interesting. We talk about the art of parenting. We talk about seasons. And When my oldest child was born, we didn't have near the research we have now of some of the harms. And it was more just a feeling, a gut feeling that I don't like the behavior I'm modeling, meaning, I want to be the kind of parent who is interruptible. I want the kind of
Mm,
parent, I want to be accessible to my children. We homeschool, so they're here all of the time. And so just recognizing that if I am allowing this thing to distract that I'm not giving them access to, it's a barrier. It's a barrier in our relationship and in our time together. And I am not a multitasker. I'm not good at that. And I think some people maybe are much better at multitasking than I am, but I knew this isn't an area of my life that I'm willing to compromise our time together. So my first step, honestly, was assessing my own relationship with technology, right? We as parents have to model the behavior we want to see. We have to go first. And so what I did was I turned on all the parental controls on my own phone. I did
ah,
not turn them on, right? We don't have, my kids don't have devices. They're too young. So I turned them on myself. And that we have a video on our website, optoutfamily.com, that shows parents how to do this. But you go through and you just take off internet access, you take off everything but phone and texts. I keep maps on my phone because I get lost almost everywhere I go. And that is what it took. I will also say the second step to that for me, this was really beneficial in sort of navigating tech and reassessing my own relationship, was I changed the phone wallpaper in the background to black. I took out all the cute beach scenes and the family photos on the lock screen and all that because I wanted to send a signal to my brain that this is a phone, not my phone. This is
mm.
not this is a phone that gives us access to the people we need to call for whatever we need to call them for, but it's not this toy to engage with. It's not this fun thing that sits on the kitchen counter that has my attention. It's just a tool. It's like a hammer. If I don't need the hammer, then I don't need the hammer. I'm not going to put, family photo stickers all over my hammer or whatever else, a toaster, I'm not going to decorate it and personalize it. And it really did the trick for me in terms of disengaging just enough that I could put my phone back in its rightful place.
Wonderful. I love that because I have heard also, some other techniques of like putting your phone in a cupboard or in a drawer and you when it rings, you go to it, you answer it and you put it back, right? Just like when we had phones that were stuck to the wall or whatever. So it's funny how we have to actually play these tricks on our brain to like you say retrain it. And it makes so much sense. I know for me, I struggle with, like you say, the hold of kind of the digital communication. Like I feel I have to be on social media to talk about my business, about the podcast and all this. And I'm still searching, like, is there a way where I don't really have to, right? And so that's a conversation for another time, but it is something that I think a lot of us struggle. I mean, I have this conversation with a lot of other, business owners of like, I wish I didn't have to. And I'm just wondering if there is a point where the have to is really the choice that we're making. So,
Yes, yes. And I will throw in there, yes, it is. I mean, I quit social media as an influencer 3 years ago, and I can still do the work that I love. I can still passionately write and edit and make books and publish books. And it is possible without social media. I would argue it's a little bit easier without social media because you're spending time doing the work. You're spending time doing the depth of the work and not sort of the broadcasting of the work. And it does kind of it deepens things, I would say. I'm much happier with my work being off of social media than on. So just to encourage, I know that's not what this podcast is
no,
about,
but
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 it's
but thank
possible.
you. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm taking it as a sign that it is possible and that I just have to kind of make those decisions and see how I can work around it. So thank you. Yeah, wonderful. Um, any other like maybe tips or kind of ways that you went about, especially I think the relationship also with you and your husband, maybe, because I think we both have to be on board to be
Mm,
able to raise our children that way. And sometimes that's not always the case in families, where one might have done the research and they know, and there's a reason behind it, and the other one is like, whatever. How did you come to terms with that together?
mm. Yeah, I love that question because it's not a tidy, before and after. And rarely are spouses on the same page about this. And I will even say for a long time, I was more reticent to adapt technology than my husband.
Mm,
And for me, it was a lot of sharing what I was finding out, sharing the research. It was a lot of patience. It's the same thing we teach parenting. We can't force our children to do things. It is a relationship first. And so for me, it took a lot of you're sort of appealing to whatever side that they make decisions from. So for him being a logical person, I was not shy about sharing research and also offering solutions. So, if I wasn't happy with maybe, hey, I noticed we're having a lot more, um, there's a, there was a season in which one of my sons was playing the old Super Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers, the kind where you have the console you have to blow on, and stick in. And
mhm,
honestly, I will say I'm much more open to sort of a Mr. Rogers episode or the old Super Mario Nintendo or Tetris than I am to anything on YouTube or anything on social media or anything device related. So, which is why I would never say that I'm completely against technology. And yet, I think what I like about those old programs is they do have a very clear starting cue and stopping cue. There's a
mm,
very sort of there, it's not just kind of on autoplay right there in the background. But there was a time in which I was like, you know what, I don't really like that this is our only mode of connection, right? This is the thing that we're sort of connecting over is playing this Super Mario 3 Nintendo. And what can we sort of replace this with? How can we shift this into something that might be even better? And so I remember we built an obstacle course in the backyard with my son. And I was like, let's be like in real life Super Mario people and let's just see where this takes us. And kind of opening that door to curiosity to, is there something better than this? And being open to where your child wants to take that. And I think our spouses pay attention to that. I think our spouses do recognize when we're willing to put in the work, when we're so strongly convicted about this thing that we are willing to sort of uh, rejigger something in our home or something in our day that does it is more time, it is more energy. And yet, I think when they see that we are willing to sacrifice that and we're not just sort of armchair experting and talking about it to death, I think that does shift something. So I think too, there were enough instances. Sometimes we just have to be willing to fail to be able to find out what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with. And I think my husband needed to see some things firsthand. I remember we sort of adapted to the Amazon Kindle. Our daughter was a voracious reader, and we were at the time traveling quite a bit overseas. And so it just made sense to, instead of using the library card, we weren't local anymore. Let's see if we can take just this one thing and have unlimited access to books. And it took a couple months to recognize unlimited access to books is not a place we want our child to have. There's not a benefit to that. And it was impossible to make those parental controls work within our own boundaries as a parent. And we would never just sort of willingly offer our boundaries to the tech companies and expect them to be on board with what we're comfortable with. That's
right.
silly. So I think my spouse needed to see that. He needed to see firsthand, oh, I see what we're working with. Should our, 6-year-old have access to vampire books? Probably not right now. And maybe not ever. Who knows? And that's up for us to decide, but not the algorithm to decide. So
Right,
to
right.
answer your question, I think there's some trial and error involved, and I think we have to be patient and very forthcoming with what we're learning and coming from a place of non-judgment and just here's what I see and what are you noticing? What happens when you turn on a program? What are you noticing after? Let's talk about it and let's come up with some solutions. And it is a worthy thing. Technology is a very worthy thing to talk about and to discuss, and it is worth focusing on, and it is worth the time and energy to discuss and to figure something out that works for everybody.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you for that, because taking the time to have those conversations and to really look at like you say, how, what is it making us feel like and our bodies and all that, and imagine what it's doing for our younger children. One question about kind of your decision to become a low tech, family. How old were your children when you really like change that?
Oh gosh, I would say that the birth of my youngest, so my youngest is now almost 4, so it's been about 4 years since I myself have left social media, and I would say that was really the big shift. It always starts with our behavior, and I think that was when my eyes were open to just really how technology was so easy to adapt to. I remember signing a summer camp form for one of my daughters, and um, there was a facial recognition app that the parent would opt into automatically unless they signed a waiver to opt out of. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to be notified, but number one, I don't want someone following her around with a camera, but number two, I don't need to know the ins and outs of her camp experience. That's for us to process once she's home. But let's play that out, right? What happens if I see her on the facial recognition app and she looks like she's not having fun? Well, now I have a decision to make as a parent, right? Now I have to like try to figure out, and this is her experience. It needs to be
Right.
separate from mine. So that's really when we began to kind of notice. When I stepped out of social media, I was able to see all of the ways in which technology was so easy to adapt so young and just become part of the air that we breathe. And I recognized it once I stepped out of, oh, this is something I want to be curious about, and I want to kind of play around with and see if we can do it a different way.
Mm.
And it is possible. It's harder, but it's
Right,
possible.
right. And so I'm assuming that your first child that you said is 12-year-old, in comparison to your youngest, they've had kind of a different experience with technology in the home.
You know what's funny? I don't know that she would really recognize the big shift. That's a good question. We should talk about that with her. I think we have always been very upfront and very vocal about the fact that we don't uh, put phones first in our family. I remember when they were very, very young, my husband and I, separately and then again together, took them all on sort of one-on-one dates downtown just to say, let's people watch. Let's just see sort of what's the environment here. What are we noticing about people? What are we observing? Every one of our children has said people are on their phone a lot instead of
Yes.
being with each other. And they notice that. They see something that feels a little off about that. And so I do think that that was such a rarity for them. They were able to notice, wow, well, why aren't they talking to each other? Why
Mm,
aren't they connecting? So I would say that their experience has probably been more similar than not. I think the difference is that we talk about it a lot more, and we made some of those, they're not mistakes, they're not failures, but we toyed around with technology more when my oldest was very young,
mm,
and that's what it took to recognize we didn't want to go there once
right,
with any of the other ones. And
right.
so what a blessing to have, that knowledge and have that firsthand experience and to be able to pivot. And that's what parenting is. It's kind of deciding, oh, well, and now I would say it's even worse. Technology is everywhere now. And
Mm,
at the time it wasn't quite so much.
right, right. And like you say, it's parenting, because I think we Unfortunately, our firstborn is always our trial and errors, right? We're learning to be parents. We've never done this before, and and I know for me, I just have two, and sure, I did things maybe a little differently with the second, or it's just part of growing up as a parent. So
Yes.
yes, wonderful. Um, any advice to parents who would be listening to us or watching they have that feeling, of like, oh, I've got to do something about technology in the house and in our family. What would be for you kind of the first steps or maybe words of encouragement to get them to kind of start going down that road of being a low tech family?
I would say listen to that feeling, listen deeply to that feeling. It is there for a reason. And I would encourage, I think it's important to think about all of the many ways that we maybe subconsciously adapt to technology before we're ready with our children, especially. I constantly have this refrain in my head, what would I do in the 80s? What would an 80s parent do? And that tends to be a very easy and clear line, because not that the 80s were the best time to raise children, certainly not. There were many, I'm sure many things were different. And yet, if I want to give my child a childhood where they can be independent and curious and they can explore and they can adventure, I want to not be in the way of that, and I want technology to not be in the way of that. And so I remember being at the pond, the local pond, with my oldest daughter. She would have been 5 or 6, and let's see, so I was there with my mother-in-law, and she came running and wanted to show me this animal, this creature that she found in the pond. And it was, the way she was describing it, it's scaly and it's slimy and it has these spikes coming out of the tails. And it's so weird. I've never seen it before. You've got to come see it. And she was explaining, we couldn't find it again. She was explaining it. I thought, this does not sound like a real thing. And I remember my mother-in-law saying, we should look it up on Google Photos and see if you can find it. And I thought, what's another way? What's a better way we could do that? And I thought, okay, people over pixels, right? So let's call my neighbor Dave. So our neighbor who's across the pond is a retired teacher, and he knows that pond like the back of his hand. He's fished it for 20 years. He knows everything about that pond. So we call him and we say, Dave, can my daughter explain this animal to you? We're really curious about what this might be. Do you have any ideas? And she gets, oh gosh, maybe a third of the way into her description. And he says, I know exactly what that is. It's a muskrat. Those aren't spikes. Those are cattails. She's building her nest. And do you want to come over and see, and come over with your parents, and let's take a
Oh,
look. And I've got a habitat here for them. And it's time for them to have babies. And we ended up just spending the whole afternoon in this wonderful lesson of habitats and ecology and everything. And I thought, what a missed opportunity if we would have just Google photoed,
yes,
um,
yes.
what a waste of time, and what a shortcut to bypass the passion of a person sharing their knowledge and their experience. And so I think about that a lot. I think about those small ways. And just as a parent, all it takes is just pausing and thinking, okay, here's the way that technology would have me go. Here's the way the algorithm would lead. Let's just pause. Let's reassess and see if there's a slower way to do it. We use this phrase a lot in our home, and that is to move slow and mend things. And it is the direct opposite of Facebook's motto, which is move fast and break things.
Mm,
And we as parents want to be people who can be mindful enough and slow down just a touch and think about where are we going? Where are we heading? Where do we want our kids to head next? And how can we help them get there, rather than hinder them along their way?
so true. I got shivers when you were talking about this because for me, my background is Montessori education, which is very much about really following the child and that curiosity and all of this. And you contacting the neighbor is really providing fuel to that curiosity, and it's building relationship. I mean, communication is about human relationships. It's not about, asking Siri what the weather is like. Like, just go outside and see what
Yes.
the weather is like. have
Yes.
that have that sensorial experience. And it's funny because this weekend I had two colleagues do a talk online about technology and kind of the different ages and how to not necessarily, use the tech world to find the answers. Like, still go to the library, open up those
Mm,
encyclopedias, go
yeah.
talk to the firemen about, what it takes. I mean, go explore, go touch, go smell, have those sensorial experiences is so important.
Mm,
One thing that you mentioned is about wanting your children to be independent. And one thing that I have noticed with technology is this over surveillance of our
mm,
children, which hurts my heart for kids. I mean, I definitely grew up in the 80s. I'm and we were let to go in the neighborhood and go to our friend's house and, bike over and all this. My mother just had a bell that she would ring when dinner was ready. Like, that was, they didn't know where we were. They didn't know what we were doing. We would tell them what we had been doing when we were around the dinner table. But now it's like this constant, knowing where they are. Oh, they're staying there a little too long. Oh, they're not home yet. All of this. And to me, that just causes like way too much stress for the parents. But also, what is your take on what it does to our children's independence and
mm.
to our children's well-being of being constantly surveilled?
I can't imagine. I don't think any of us can begin to fathom what it would be like to grow up being constantly monitored. But I do know I'm not surprised that our children are so anxious. I'm not. I have a friend who, Lenore Skenazy. Are you
Oh,
familiar with her
yes,
work?
yes. I
Okay.
just interviewed her. Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
so you
yeah,
know
yeah.
her
Yes, she's
her
wonderful.
she's wonderful and she's been a wonderful resource for this book, but just her definition that what is anxiety if not fear that you cannot handle the world. And that
Mm,
is what I think of when I think of our kids because I mean, I know that if I was, sort of on this digital leash, that would be my takeaway is I must not be able to be safe in this world and I must not be able to handle it or be capable of it. And I I do think that that would be a very crushing way to live. And I know for my own kids, my oldest, who's just now turned 12, she we've talked a lot about this because I wouldn't say that she's not fearful of some of the things that can happen in this world. But instead of giving her a phone, which I think offers a very false sense of security, right? Because Twitter can't call 911 for you. And, Live 360, me knowing where she is not going to help her solve a problem. And
exactly.
so, uh, one thing that we did with our kids, instead of giving them the phone with the tracking device or the ability to call, is we would, when they want to roam the neighborhood, we would point out, okay, here's where this person lives, here's where this person lives, here are sort of your safe houses where you can pop in anytime they're home and they know whatever you need. And also, here's a walkie-talkie if you want it. We've got the base here if you need anything. And also, here's a pocket knife if you run into anything along the way. I'm not really sure what else to provide other than the fact that you are able to defend yourself and sort of navigate life because this is how you learn. And also, this is how we learn as parents. We have to
Yes.
let them go a little bit in these low stakes environment. And I think if we're not sort of capitalizing on the low stakes opportunities, we're certainly not going to be skilled or practiced or well versed when it comes to the high stakes opportunities. And that's why we run into, I mean, there were people I interviewed for this book who were, one was 33 and her mom was still tracking her on Life 360 and wondering why she wasn't home from work from now. And it's sort of, I don't know anybody that thrives in that environment. I don't.
Yeah.
Maybe they do. I can't find them yet.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I would have a hard time understanding how to thrive in an environment that way of, even, even sometimes just being home, sometimes like, what did you do? What are you doing? It's like, oh, back off. Like, let me do whatever I want. Or why aren't you up yet? Or, silly
Yeah.
things like that. So I can't imagine like being, like you say, a digital leash. I like that expression because that's really what it feels like.
Mm.
Um, yeah. And have you thought about, as your daughter grows up and maybe at some point, asks for a phone, like have you and your husband and have you maybe talked this as a family as to when that might happen if it does?
Yeah. Yeah. We have a very loose strategy. And a couple things is we will provide a landline for sure, so that friends can come and go. We have I always say to friends in my life that I'm much better at answering my door than answering my phone. So open door policy, come on over whenever you want to. Um, but the big thing is when our kids decide that they would like a phone, one thing we'll do when they start driving is we will provide a flip phone in the glove compartment of a car, if that helps them feel like they can contact someone in emergency. I can understand that. A track phone, whatever, something that doesn't really have a plan, but that has minutes available to them. But then when they decide they're ready for a phone, when they can handle the investment of a phone, when they can handle the long-term budget and cost of a phone, both time and financial, then they can decide whatever phone they would like. It's their decision. They will be by then 16, 17, 18. And my hope is that we will have we talk about everything in our family. So we will have modeled sort of what it looks like. My husband has a smartphone. I have a smartphone without internet, without anything turned on. And so we have very different experiences of sort of what modeling looks like and how we use technology. And I would never want them to just blindly adapt to how we have done it. And yet I want them to have models if they choose that they want to do it a different way. My goal is I want to provide you with what will nourish as a child. I want to
Mm,
teach you and guide you toward what is good and what is going to nourish you as a person. And then I have to recognize you will make your own choices.
mm,
So if you choose, if you want, I have a lot of parents say, like, aren't you worried about, them leaving your house and just getting a smartphone and not knowing what to do or how to balance or how to set those boundaries themselves? And I think not really, because, even now, a couple months ago, I went to an elephant sanctuary with my daughter, and we just ate junk food the whole way there and the whole way back. We're on the road and it's like snacks all day. And we got home and we thought, we feel miserable. This does not feel good. And there is such a natural boundary in recognizing when you don't feel well. And I want them to know what it is to feel well and what it is to feel drawn toward real experiences and sensory experiences and being out in the world and relying on other people and not on machines for everything. I want them to know what that feels like, so they know anything less than that um, isn't as rich of an experience. It's truly not anything where we are sort of replacing human connection with that sort of rote and dispassionate, and just even hearing Siri answer a question kind of just gives me the shivers. I don't want to be answered a question that lacks any passion. And so that's our loose plan. Our loose strategy is when you're ready for a phone, you will know. And when you can afford it, we won't be gifting phones. That's just going to be part of how you grow and how you make that decision. And we're here to assist with whatever knowledge we have, and we're here to sort of mentor you along the way. It's not going to be once you choose that it's hands off, but it's about the relationship first.
yes, yes. No, I love that. I love that it's really about them being able to make that decision when the time comes, when they can afford it, and knowing that probably when that time comes, we will have different devices anyways.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
now it's these watches, I see people talking to their watch or, things like that. So it's ever evolving and to answer to your friend's concern about not knowing how to gauge, I think it's so true about how it makes you feel. Like you quickly realize, like for me, I remember my son. So I was of the mindset, and I made choices when they were young not to invest any type of funds into video games. For me, it
Mm,
was all about video games. In the 90s, early 2000. And, it was the Wii and the this and the that, and it was always the latest, greatest. And I just made the decision that I didn't want to put any money into this, that I would rather put it into travel because
mm,
I love to travel, and we've traveled the world and all this. And he did question, like, it's not fair, my friends have it. And I said, well, yes, but all families are different. And have they been to the pyramids in Egypt and in Mexico? Probably not. So those are just the choices that your parents are making. But I do remember him one time when he was just on my laptop playing a game, and we had a time limit, a pretty short time limit, and he went way over. I was probably busy doing something, and I remember him coming to me and says, "Oh, my body feels icky." Like, he had that physical sensation of he had gone over the limit of what
mm.
what that
Wow.
that sensorial overload can do. And so to me, that was, well, that's good that you noticed that, because
Yeah.
that's why we limit the time. So
Yeah. Wow. That's very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah.
How old was he? Do you remember?
I want to say probably about between 8 or 10, something
Mm,
like that.
wow.
Um, so, I won't say today. Sometimes I'm concerned, he's now 23. I'm concerned that he's a bit too much on his digital device, but
Mm,
he's not really an influencer, but social media is part of his life and his profession. So, but
yeah,
he'll come to terms when he needs to come to terms with it. So,
exactly.
like
Yes.
you said, we just need to model what we think is best. So,
Hmm.
wonderful. But I really, really like what you started out with, is putting parental guidelines on our own phones. I'm going to try that, because I'm sure that that's an experiment in itself. So very
Yes.
good. Very good. So I always love to wrap up a little bit more on a personal level and more on a parenting question. You mentioned that your eldest is 12. If you were to go back 13 years ago, when you were first expecting your child, what wise words would you tell yourself, knowing all that you know today?
Mm. I would just tell myself to um, get to know the people under your roof. Not to, our job is not to fill them or pour into them or all of it. We know when we think of them like the empty vessel, right? And they're just going to be a conglomeration of all of our ideals and thoughts. And no, they come out people, they
Mm,
come out people. And I would remind myself that she is a person, her brother is a person, her other sister is a person, and we can change people about this much. I think we can certainly attempt to influence them for good. We can share what we know, and then we have to just hold the rest very loosely and honor its weight, though honor the weight of parenting while still holding it very loosely. And
mm,
anytime that I try to force or control or overstep my boundary as a parent, I have always regretted that how I feel after and how they
mm,
feel after, and
mm,
sort of that small damage that occurs, and then the immediate repair that needs to happen
mm.
after. So I would just really remind myself to parent from a place of getting to know that other person rather than a place of having them get to know me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. Any parting words that you would like to leave our listeners and viewers with today, Erin?
I would just say, I think technology is a really important topic for today, but I would never want to approach it from a fear-based way. And so I would just encourage parents that we can call the shots, and we do get a fair, certainly when they're young, we get such the upper hand in this whole conversation, and after interviewing so many people in and out of technology, in and out of Silicon Valley, and recognizing sort of what technology does to get us hooked onto our devices, I recognize parents can do it even better. Parents
Mm,
can connect far better than what technology wants to connect with us, and use that to your advantage. We really are given such a unique time together in our families and in our homes. And I would just encourage every parent to recognize the influence they have in their own home, and the opportunity they have in their own home. And it's not us versus tech. We have all the hope in the world, and it's going to be a really bright future. And let's be there and walk with our kids together.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Erin. This has been delightful and very inspirational, at least for me. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you.